Hello, fourth graders. We are continuing today with our social justice issues unit of study. And on Monday, we introduced this unit and we talked about what a social issues unit is all about. And we talked about the different steps that you are going to have to take as a reader in order to get to the meat of the story of these social issues. And so if you look up here at the top of our anchor chart, it says, when reading and thinking about social issues, readers ask, and the very first place that we talked about where you needed to start is this question of what are my characters' struggles or challenges or conflicts? And that brings us into today's lesson. And for today's lesson, I want to teach you that reading with a social issues lens means studying how and when a character struggles. And I want you to look over here on the right. And I've summarized up the 4 kinds of struggles or conflicts that a character might face. The first one is internal, which is character versus self. The second one is external, which is character versus character. Then external, character versus nature, and an external, character versus society. So we're going to look in depth at these 4 different kinds of struggles that a character might have. And then I have a small exercise that I want you to do along with each of these. The first one, internal conflict, character versus self. And in this kind of situation, if your character is in this kind of a struggle, you'll notice that they face a struggle within themselves. There's a lack of confidence or ability. They must make a difficult choice, or they're faced with a personal problem. And I want you to pause here and ask yourself whether or not the characters of Selva and Naya are facing this type of conflict. So pause here, and you can jot it down, or you can just keep it in your brain. But I want you to think about, do you think that this is the kind of struggle that either of those 2 characters are facing? Okay, you should have paused and done that exercise. I'm going to talk about this in relation to the Lemonade War. And if you remember in the Lemonade War, we had Evan and Jesse. And Evan faced a lot of jealousy with his sister. He faced low confidence with his sister and with his grades and how she was going to be in his class. And he also struggled with doing the right thing. But these are not social issues. So being jealous of a sibling, that is a struggle, but it's not a social issue. However, in this book, Evan and Jesse did face divorce and poverty, and these are 2 social issues that those characters were dealing with, were struggling with. That was a conflict of theirs. The second kind of struggle or conflict is character versus character. And this is when the character has a problem with another character, or if there's a disagreement or a big issue with another person, or there's mental or physical issues between the people. And I want you to do this same exercise. You're going to do this with each one. I want you to pause and think about Selva and Naya. Do they have a conflict with another character? So pause there and just reflect on this. Okay, you should have paused. And the example I'm going to talk about is Matilda. Now, Matilda, she didn't get along with her family. She was really lonely. She felt different because she was so smart. Those are struggles she had, but they weren't social issues. However, she did face abuse, neglect, and this is a really big one and kind of a big social issue right now, not having access to school. And she wasn't allowed to go to school for all the years leading up until when the book takes place. So the ones on the left are conflicts, but not social issues. And the struggles on the right are both. It's important that you note the difference between them, because when we're asking you to think about the social issues in A Long Walk to Water, we want you to be able to tell the difference between something that's just a struggle or a conflict and something that's a struggle and a social issue. All right. The third one is character versus nature. And this is when the character faces a problem that involves elements of nature that are beyond their control. Some examples of this would be like natural disasters, survival stories, diseases, epidemics, and pandemics. So think about now if there's anything going on in your book that where Selva and Naya are facing any kind of character versus nature conflict. All right. Now this one, I thought about what book to use as an example, and then I realized I had the perfect example for a character versus nature conflict, and that is you. You guys are all going through a real conflict, a real struggle with COVID and social distancing and sheltering in place and school being at home, distance learning. So that would be a major conflict, but your conflict isn't with another person. Your conflict is with the coronavirus. So I thought you were the perfect example to use for that one. Our final example, or our final type of conflict, is character versus society. And this is when the character battles what they perceive to be unjust or unfair, where there's racism or discrimination, inequalities. And for this one, I knew instantly what book I was gonna use. But before we do that, I want you to pause and do one last time of thinking about Selva and Naya. Are there any struggles that they're facing that could fit in this category? Okay, so no surprise, I picked Number the Stars for this last one. And I didn't even bother with figuring out what the other struggles were because this book is just packed so full of social issues. Racism, inequality, discrimination, war, and unjust government. This book had so many social issues in it that I didn't even bother with the other kinds of struggles. This one has great examples of what a social issue is. All right, so with that, your task for following this mini lesson is we would like you to respond to this question. What does this character's conflict suggest about the social issues in this book? So I want you to choose either Selva or Naya, and I want you to talk about one of the conflicts that they are facing that is also a social issue. So you're going to pick one of them. It can be either Selva or Naya, and you're going to think about a conflict that they're facing and then ask yourself, is it also a social issue? And when you find one that you think is, yep, that fits both, we want you to write that down, and you can either do it in a notebook and screenshot it, or you can type it right into Schoology and submit it as a lesson. Off you go.